You are listening to the Comic Collective podcast. Hello, one. Hello. Oh, this is the very absolute first episode of a new podcast that we are calling the Comic Collective. I am AJ, and I'm sitting here with two co-hosts. If you would kindly introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
John Curry, for what it's worth. It's not worth anything.
Yeah,
Nothing.
nothing. And how about you?
Christopher Keeney, Chris Keeney. Whatever.
Peeny Keeney.
Yeah. So people listening to this podcast, at least as far as I know, probably kind of already know what's going on with it. But basically, a real quick rundown. We're going to go through comic books and talk comics, talk comic strips, anything that kind of has to do with animation and anything that spawned off of it. So if you're interested in comic books, or if you're interested in looking at or watching movies that come from the Marvel universe or the DC universe, or if you're interested in indie comics or whatever, this is the podcast for you. That being said, we kind of came up with a couple topics that we wanted to kind of kick this podcast off with to try to build a little bit of, enthusiasm up. So let's start off with you, John. Tell me, what got you into comics?
Well, comic books are awesome. And that goes for every comic book ever made, even Fantastic Four. It all contributes something to the cause. Mm-hmm. Nothing really got me into it, but if I had to say one thing, it might have been my grandma.
Your grandma?
Graham's holding it down.
Graham's?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, tell me about this, because normally grandmothers are not people that get people into comics.
That's true. But for us special select people, grandmother is who raised us in lieu of parents. And in some attempt to identify...
You say that so, nonplussed, whatever.
Right.
I didn't really have parents, but I had a grandmama.
Well, I'm over it. It's no big deal. You're crying. Shut up.
I'm fine.
He's basically Batman.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Damn, that's...
I'm the Batman minus, the gorgeous black hair,
Oh,
But
and
everything else is on point.
The millions and millions of dollars?
Billions, even.
Billions,
Yeah,
damn.
yeah. And
At some point, he just started calling his grandmother Alfred, too.
it's true, and it was also romantic in a small way.
Oh, that's getting guilty.
Yeah.
All right, so that's actually... Why? What happened? How did your grandma get you into comics?
With the age gap, she probably felt like there wasn't a lot for us to talk about, so just started picking things up for me so that I could try and identify at a young age. And one day she brought home a comic book from the grocery store. I think it was Piggly Wiggly or something. We lived in Lee Summit, so it was something white trash.
Sure.
And all right, Chris, white trash, Lee Summit.
Yeah. Fine. I live in Blue Springs.
Oh shit, you're right. Never mind.
Oh God, even worse.
Yeah, but so she brought me home a comic, and it fucking blew my mind. And
What was it?
oh,
Tranny porn.
you just stealing all my.
It's a book full of dicks.
Yeah, that's what it
Just
was. It was a plethora of peni.
Plethora of peanut.
No, it was a terrible Green Lantern comic, and I to all the Green Lantern fans out there and everything like that, yeah, Green Lantern is awesome, but this was Kyle Rayner, and it was back in the 90s, so it was a bad comic.
Hold on a sec. Okay, so I need to talk about this for a second for my own perspective. I don't know a whole lot about DC, and it's weird for a person that's starting a podcast about comics.
It'll be a learning experience.
Yeah, it'll be a learning experience. I had a comic back when I was a kid that was a Green Lantern, and I didn't really get into the storyline, so I don't really remember if this was the same cat, but I remember the cover very distinctly. It was a Green Lantern dude, and he was plucking the wings off of a fairy, and it was a black guy, and that's all I remember of the
Jon Stewart.
cover. Who is that?
Jon Stewart.
That sounds like a talk show host from Comedy Central.
It does.
Yeah.
Funnily enough,
Yeah.
he's also
a black
the
Green
Black Green
Ranger.
Lantern.
He's the Black Green Lantern.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's okay.
You
So
have the white Green Lanterns, and then you have the Black Green
and
Lantern.
that's Jon Stewart.
Yeah, there's all the interesting Green Lanterns, and then there's the Black Green Lantern, which sounds racist. I just mean they never do anything awesome with that character.
But they try to over develop him by saying he is a Marine, and he's also an architect or something like that, or an engineer.
Which they start to make really interesting, because they'll be oh, his constructs are really technical, and it
they're not hollow.
Okay, so this guy was, and I am glad we just divulge into this topic because I might be talking for a voice for people that might not know a whole lot about this like I do. So this John Stewart cat, he was a comic book that I had back in, like, I would want to say the early 90s, maybe mid 90s. Was that about his time frame? Were the Lantern Corps, was that established by the early mid 90s? Like, did they have the orange and the yellows and the other lanterns, do you know?
They did the Green Lantern Corps, like, right away in the 60s, I think is where they brought it out. Might have been like really early 70s, but the Green Lantern Corps, as soon as they introduced Hal Jordan, and you're not like going with the magic lanterns, you're going with sort of like the pseudo-science Green Lanterns.
Okay.
Right away the Corps exists, but there's no like orange, red, Sinestro Corps, like...
That just took some kind of artistic development. And
I think whenever Jeff Johns came in, like Blackest Nights, correct me if I'm wrong, was like the culmination of like years and years of worth of storytelling from like back whenever he first took over the Green Lantern timeline. So I want to say he had a lot of control over bringing in the Sinestro Corps and then Avarice and everything like that came with it. And then it all culminated towards Blackest Nights and then Brightest Day that I don't think anyone ever read.
No, because it was like, hey, look, I spent a year buying this main comic, like 5 different Green Lantern titles, and then like at least 2 or 3 peripheral comics of every line, including all your deadlines.
This prologue, this epilogue, this tie-in.
Yeah, and then they're like, guess what? Now you've got like another year of the same thing. So even though you just spent like $1,000 in comics to keep up with one storyline, we expect you to keep putting money down. I think all the fans were collectively like, Grumpy Cat now.
Were you saying that DC won't just hit the reset button for no reason?
Oh my god.
That is crazy.
DC reset must be Tuesday.
But, God, we got off track quick. Anywho, so Grandma brought that home, and I was amazed. And like I said, it was a 90s comic book, so it wasn't gold by any stretch of the imagination. And during this collective process, we must have covered everything from cool Batman, Superman, and X-Men and Spider-Man stuff, albeit 2099, which is its own conversation, into like DuckTales and Gargoyles, like, which is really bottom of the barrel, whatever the grocery store had.
I hated when I'd go to the grocery store as a kid, or the pharmacy or whatever, and there'd be like nothing good.
It'd been picked clean.
Yeah, like for some reason Batman's gone, Spider-Man's gone, Captain America's gone, like all that's gone, and you're like, oh, I get to get a comic, but like, I guess it's Darkwing Duck for me. Yay! Here's a book that
Is that a Sonic? Oh, I already have it.
Yeah. There's some Archies over there. I guess I'll see what Jughead's up to, and that'll...
Okay.
Darkwing Duck.
Yeah. So it started with that.
Okay.
Moving past that and everything, of course, like, that puts me like single digits, like 8 and 9 and stuff like that. So going back home eventually, like I tend to sometimes, it would be traded with friends who had other things kind of going around. Also at the same time, the 90s was very saturated with what I consider some of the best DC and Marvel animation to date. Most notably, the old X-Men.
Oh, yeah.
Don't watch it now. Just remember how it was.
No, I think if you watched it back then, you can watch it now.
Yeah.
It's absolutely golden. I watched it probably 2 years ago.
Oh, but those last years where they switched...
The last season is just awful.
Oh, yeah.
It's like...
They switch animation studios over to, like, India or something, and it's just god-awful.
Like, it goes from, like, a fluid, like... You know, kind of how I remember, like, the actual movement and, like, the voice. Like, the
it was real impressive.
Makes sense, and then, like, it goes to, like action figure type movement. Like, 90s action figure, no articulation. Like, all kinds of characters just standing in a static pose while one character moves only his mouth. Like,
well, and then you also see, like, how many flaws there was in the creative process back then. Like, I can remember one scene very specifically where, for no reason, Wolverine and Sabretooth switched voices. And everything. It was like all the same lines, but they were being animated to the wrong characters. And so, yeah. So, pour yourself a drink and have a laugh. But otherwise, just keep the good memories. Spider-Man watch it now, the old 90s Spider-Man, like forced animations that just play in just over and over again.
Repeat animation,
Lapsed over and over again, especially like mannerisms and everything like
yeah.
that. They just do the same things over and over.
Yeah, and the depth perception or the depth perspective doesn't necessarily line up as well as it might, you know.
God, no. But, you know, back then it was gold.
Well,
you know?
with
Yeah,
that,
it was
like,
great.
With Spider-Man, it's also like that, like, interjection of like new CG technology, like when it's not helpful.
Right. And yeah, I'm sure like some sensor rules came into play because I think all the guns were laser guns. Like there were no like actual bullet guns.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, that's like.
Well, did they have like the Y7? I don't think they had the Y7 PG.
Oh yeah, probably not. No.
No, but if you listen to like the commentary tracks for the Batman like anime TV show, they had to fight to get real guns, and the only reason they were able to do it was because they argued it's like a quasi 40s kind of thing where there'd be no laser guns, so they were actually able to get the sensors to lift their like no bullets rule. That's why like
is that when they had like Tommy guns and shit?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's why like everything else though has like ridiculous laser guns. Even
but it was
like
also
the Ninja
like
Turtles.
it was also like 40s Chicago era too.
Yeah,
sure.
But anyhow, got off on all that great animation. Even watched stuff like Incredible Hulk and Fantastic Four, which, you know, it was what it was. And we took it in and it was fantastic. Moving past that, kept up with it as frequently as I could through my teens, through high school and stuff like that. Read a lot of Marvel at that point. Didn't really go one direction or another. At that point, they were also coming out with anime-inspired stuff. Like, did you ever see the old Spawn anime that came on HBO? They're supposed to be making a remake too. That was fucking fantastic. But again, like for animation, GIFs almost played in concession over and over again to a sound studio that was less quality than what you've put together.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, if there's any dubbers out there that needs some work, I am open. So.
Okay, so moving into early 20s, I got to meet a cool collection of people and everything. Present party excluded, Mr. Chris Keeney. Like-minded individuals.
Chris Keeney. I need a button. Chris. I need a button. I need a sound bank button board out here. I can hit and like Chris Keeney, and it's like there's like a little thunder.
Right, we all get our intros.
Yeah, everyone gets there. It's like wrestling. Yeah. Everyone's
dun,
like,
dun,
all right,
dun.
now on the microphone.
Dun, 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 dun.
Chris Keeney.
Let's talk about overhype.
Yeah.
It's Chris Keeney. Hi guys, it's Chris Keeney here.
Come in with the Michael Moore voice. On Sonic Spectrum, this is Chris Keeney.
We start developing heels and plot lines and shit. I start booing people like, oh, it's Chris Keeney. We're booing.
Yeah.
Like,
All of a sudden, Springer shows back.
Right.
There's an audience behind us telling us to fight for no reason.
Don't worry, automatically as people start to listen, you'll hear like their collective booing when you drop an episode.
DC's better. No, Marvel's better.
Oh, and you know, nobody came in for that fight. I was looking forward to the you can't control it. You put a Marvel fan in, even though he might read DC or something else, and then you put a DC fan in next to it, and eventually they just catch each other's gaze and they're like, Batman vs Superman suck dick. Fuck you. Ant-Man is the equivalent of a above ground pool. You know, like, and then it'll just start, and all of a sudden fanboyism will ensue.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, but everyone agrees that Dark Knight was the shit. So
Yeah, exactly.
there's some.
What was it? You that told me that you hadn't seen all the Dark Knights?
Oh God, I haven't seen a whole lot of stuff.
Have you seen the second?
Oh, I've seen the first two. I haven't seen
That's
the
all
one
that
with
matters.
Bane.
Yeah, that's
like,
all that matters.
You
I heard the one with Bane's really good though.
you've been talking to a liar.
You can't follow up what Heath Ledger did.
I understand that, and I was gonna, whenever I did watch it, I was gonna watch it with that in mind because Heath Ledger, literally, I think, kind of went insane for that role.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe I'm just being weird and speculating here, but
No, he had like a diary that they sold off eventually, where it's like, you know, his trip down Jokerism and everything. You know?
well,
Apparently,
method actors can get fucking weird.
Yeah, I read on Suicide Squad the girl who played Enchantress also started losing her mind. I'm like, what? You had like 5-second role, and you were mostly naked during it. Like, what happened here?
Wouldn't you lose your mind too if you had to learn to do whatever that dance was, though?
Oh, the hip dance. I might lose my mind if I had to learn how to hip dance.
Okay,
Anywho.
so anyhow, yeah, I haven't seen a lot of what I need to see, so I'll kick off with my little foyer into comics. I started back when I was a wee lad. I don't know, I was probably 5. And my dad...
Knee high to a grasshopper.
Yeah, my dad actually collected comics. And so it was kind of like a situation where he kind of had a lot of a little bit of comic knowledge, but it was more of, I think it's called the Golden or the Silver Age.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one of those it is.
They all reference decades before us.
Sure, but the coolest comic that he still has is Amazing Spider-Man 16. And the cool thing about this one is it has Daredevil's first appearance, and it's Daredevil's in a yellow outfit. And it's this very... I don't know if it's deal. Yeah. I don't know if it's his first appearance, but it's Daredevil in a yellow outfit.
Yellow suit Daredevil's still a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I looked it up if it's mint, and this was like a couple years ago. But if it was mint, which it's not, it's been read and enjoyed, and I agree with that. But if it was completely mint, it's like $500. So I mean, that ain't fucking bad. But I don't think I'd sell it. I think
but you gotta get it graded, and then also that's. I mean, I sold a first issue of The Walking Dead to a fan at just Comic-Con one year, and everything for $500. And everything. So if you get a fan out there, man, you could almost name your price.
Sure, but eventually, if I ever, it's like having a big box full of Magic cards. Yeah, these are worth a bunch of money. I don't fucking want to part the fucking thing out and try to sell them piece by piece, though. So it's maybe comic books are a little bit less than that, but it still feels like I don't want to buy a magazine, look up fucking. I guess you'll have to do that anymore with the advent of the internet. I'm showing my age here. Back to
magazines.
Tell
me more.
That's what I used to do back in middle school, was look up Magic cards.
In your old Wizard magazine?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Fucking A.
I'd be like, hell yeah. Weather Light, I had whatever that Lotus card was. Anyways. Alright, so my intro into comics. I watched the X-Men animated series, and I was my shit. I love that show quite a bit, especially the Phoenix Saga. That was really cool, but I think everyone that watched that show probably liked that specific. I mean, hell, they made a movie after it, for Christ's sake. But so I watched the Phoenix Saga off and on. I kind of like bought comics, but I never got really too into the purchasing of comics per se. I did collect a lot of I don't know what they were called, but they're like these cards. And then it was like almost like baseball cards.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the Fleer Ultra cards.
Yeah, those are fantastic.
Those are cool. And especially because they kept getting better, and they would release like the next year, and they would come out, and now you could flip it over, and there's like this fucking chart, and it says, well, this particular superhero is this fast, and he's this smart, and this, and so it's like
mine would beat yours. He's got 9.
Like, well, look at I got charts and shit, asshole. So yeah, so
keep
those
your
were
opinion
badass.
to yourself. I got facts.
One of my favorite cards, and just because it was stupid, was there's a superhero named Combustion, and his superpower was he could blow up, but he couldn't like heal, and he only did it twice before he died.
Fuck.
And that was I had a card, and that's like it said this like he did it once and barely survived, and then he blew up again and died. His name was Combustion.
I bet though, if you could probably lead with, all right, my power is combustion. You can either put the money back and we can all go home, or I will take your shit out, self included.
Sounds like a plot line to a TV show named Heroes.
Like what happens? Like, do you make a costume if that's your power? Like, do you come with the whole identity knowing if you go out, all you can really do is tell people?
Well, it's just like a kind of a warning, or
Sure, I would make a costume out of really tight fucking duct tape and just pray, like, dear God, I could blow up at any second.
That would be both uncomfortable and annoying. Just hear. What's that ripping sound?
I would imagine blowing up would suck too.
Like, I guess now you could bring like a smartphone and be like, look, here's a YouTube video of the first time I did it.
Check my wiki.
Yeah, check my wiki, please. I only got a couple days before the next one's due, and I don't know if I can handle it.
I'm impressed.
I ate some Taco Bell shit.
I'm impressed he was able to Taco Bell. I'm impressed he was able to do it and then come back to do it again. Like,
he
was holding back a little bit the first time.
Well, it showed like his picture on the little card was like him, but like from his shoulder down to his navel was like exploding outwards, and his eyes were kind of exploding outwards too. And I guess that was the first time. I was like, dear God. So like the second time, probably like if you ever played the old school Doom, like when you shot something with a rocket launcher and it turned into like dog meat chunks, it's probably that. So thanks Marvel for thanks for I was my impressionable young 10-year-old mind too, you know. That didn't warp me at all. So continuing on, eventually I got into comics when I could afford them, and I was probably in my early 20s, mid 20s. And then it was kind of like I was swapping back and forth, reading comic lines with my friends, a lot of which are in the collective. Nicholas the Wolf Tamburello and
El Lobo.
Richard Hudson, and I would swap Tristan Ortiz, you know, just comics back and forth with them, and they just recommend a line and I would read it. Comics I really enjoyed, though, I'm a little bit more of a Marvel than I am a DC. A little bit is probably an understatement. Wow, I can really hear that. That's a truck, sorry. Alright, so...
that was the sound of DC fans driving away.
Right. DC fans driving the fuck away from this podcast. No, I still read some DC, but I just knew a whole lot more about Marvel, and the whole reason for that was because of that X-Men animated cartoon. I just knew X-Men, and then by virtue of that, I kind of knew like Iron Man, and I kind of knew, you know, the Avengers, all of the Avengers and whatnot.
Weird little crossovers they did.
Sure, yeah. And my favorite superhero has always been Captain America. He's my boy. I love Captain America.
Bleed red, white, and blue for Captain America.
So you're a Rob Liefeld fan then, huh?
Who? I don't know who Rob Liefeld is.
Chris, you're the nerdiest guy in the room. We all get it.
So, you like that one episode in that one series. That one season.
How do you feel about Rob Liefeld?
So, one of the comic series that I actually really enjoyed is actually Conan.
Hitting the independent vein. I like it.
Dark Horse Conan, specifically. It was really well written, really well drawn as well.
I hear Red Sonja was also really good.
It was. I had a couple of Red Sonja, and I had a couple of Solomon Kane.
I don't even know about that.
Yeah. And then also along with my collecting, I for a while I was collecting the Stephen King comics. If you've seen some of
Dark
those.
Tower?
Dark Tower.
Yeah.
What was the other one? There's another one that was The Stand, I think.
Was The Stand put in comic book form? That would have been fantastic.
I think it was. And it was the same art style that was all kind of like that weird cell-shaded weirdness, whatever that is.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another podcast, maybe. Like, how do you feel about computer-aided? Because, I mean, all comic books have probably computer touched up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I mean, let's ask our artist.
I mean...
Are they all done by hand now?
No, most of them are digital. There's some that like Jim Lee and his inker, I forget his name, I think it's Scott Williams. They still do traditional art, but obviously the color gets put in digitally. Yeah. So, I mean...
Wasn't Jim Lee the standard for like how a lot of things are drawn now in the DC universe?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be.
I mean, it sounds like almost passe to be like, I'm going to suck Jim Lee's dick for a little bit, but... He
Cup
is
the balls.
Jim Lee for a reason.
Yeah.
But even like older comic artists, like I know Brian Boland, when The Killing Joke got re-released, he was like, if you're going to re-release it, I want to go back and do the color digitally because I hated the way it was done the first time. So even like a lot of old school artists are like,
is it because digital you can just make them more vibrant and pop out more?
Yeah, it's
get your lines
you can
straight.
Kind of George Lucas a little bit, where like this is what I wanted to do.
I see.
And I mean sometimes they George Lucas it all the way, where it's like this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to do like 20 years later as an old man.
Right. because I have that Killing Joke, the re-released one, and I was looking at. I actually can see it in my head. I remember looking at some pictures of the Killing Joke, the old comic that were online, and it almost like if you were to take the picture somehow on your cell phone and turn the brightness up just a little bit, it kind of bleeds the color out, whereas when they digitally enhanced it, it made the purples more purple and contrast much more with the greens. Does that make sense? Like, I see why an artist would want to do that, but then I can also see why an artist wouldn't. I don't know. That's an interesting topic for me. Maybe not. If you say all artists basically do it, is there any artists? Well, let's go to you. Is there, first of all, what got you into comics? And a follow-up question: is there any artists specifically because you're into art that you are very into, like some of your favorite comic book artists?
I mean, honestly, eventually the two topics start to be kind of the same anyway.
Sure.
Me,
well,
so.
Just introduce and tell us about your intro into comics.
So for me, the first comics I got was at like a wholesale club. And I don't know how prevalent these actually are through the world, but like here in the Midwest, there's always a few like Costco and Sam's Club. But it was at a Sam's Club where there was like a big package of like reprint comics, which you used to find like a lot of like physical form reprint comics like in toy stores and department stores. But it was a bunch of Marvel books, and that's literally my earliest memory is getting these comics and kind of, I couldn't even read at that point, but like looking through them. But beyond that, where I really started to love comics was just when I go to the pharmacy or the grocery store with my mom, I'd pick up comics, and the first kind of storyline that I started to halfway be able to follow was the Clone Saga for Spider-Man, which I know like everyone's like rolling their eyes.
The what saga?
The Clone Saga.
Clone Saga.
Just the best Spider-Man story ever.
You know, you say that, but if it had ended when it was supposed to, it would have been gold. And like I could fill like an hour and a half of just talking about.
I don't know much about the Clone Saga. When was the Clone Saga like being released? What was the year-ish?
Early 90s. So like what happened is back in the 70s they wrote a story where they had made a Spider-Man clone, and the idea was they would fight and the clone would die and the real Peter Parker would live on. And as comic sales were starting to dip again after the market kind of fell out, Marvel wanted to make some sales, and they came up with the idea of, oh, well, we'll just make it so that the clone was the one that survived, and Peter was the one who looked like he died. Then we'll just say that Peter also survived, but he's been kind of in exile, and he shows up and upsets the natural order. And it was supposed to just reset things, but
kind of a soft reset for the time.
Yeah, I mean, just
was it still in like the 614 universe or whatever it's called?
The canon universe.
Canon universe.
Yeah. I mean, it was all supposed to be like in canon, real stuff.
So it's just a twist. Like, ooh, what a twist! We're gonna say the whole time you were reading comics, it was really the clone.
You got Shyamalan.
Well, what happened was they had written like. Eventually, they had just gotten so far with the Mary Jane Peter Parker romance that they were married, and Mary Jane had a baby on the way. And they're like, well, we can't have Spider-Man out fighting bad guys while, and picking up diapers on the way home.
Missing sonogram appointments.
Right.
So he was supposed to fade off, and then this new Spider-Man was supposed to come in and kind of revitalize things.
Kind of like DC does, kind of, with new rotations. Okay.
But then, like, Marvel, through this process, changed, like, their hierarchy, like, 4 or 5 times. And they switched from story to marketing be the premise, back to, telling good stories. And, like, with all these shifting focuses and other, like, storylines, like, from other areas, like, they did the Onslaught story in the Age of Apocalypse. So they're like, well, we can't do any big Spider-Man stuff right now, so just kind of keep this clone thing going while we wrap up these X-Men books because they're selling well. So what happens is these writers keep trying to figure out ways to make this clone thing keep working, and you end up with just what was supposed to be like literally one story, like not even 6 issues, ended up being like 3 of just the longest years for any Spider fan.
A 3-year issue
Damn.
run.
Just about.
Were you attracted? Did you like the comic series or the comic run? Did anything in particular? Like, was the art good? Like, because you have an eye for that shit. Like, who was the artist? Do you remember?
I don't remember who was the artist. Like, the first artist I paid attention to was Todd McFarlane.
Okay, yeah.
But not
Fair enough.
like not for Spawn. Like, it would be years later before I was like, oh, so this McFarlane guy did Spawn as well.
What'd you watch? What'd you look at of his?
Well, eventually I started getting like kind of like I talked about before, those back issues that would get kind of reprinted and stuffed in like packages that you get like a toy store. There were a lot of like Spider-Mans that had Todd McFarlane because he had just wrapped up his run shortly before this and had moved over to Image, so they had, you know, it was still recent, good-looking artwork that it was cheaply printed.
And can I say that isn't McFarlane credited with turning Spider-Man to the lanky kind of spider body from like the puffy sort of 60s style Spider-Man?
Yeah, he...
Same way with the webbing, I want to say. Like, he's credited for like making the web kind of spider-esque.
Yeah, well, I mean, he like, his web doesn't look like real web, but like for the longest time I was like, well, that's how a Spider-Man web should look, because initially like people hated like because he'd have those little rings wrapped around the web that gave it a real organic look.
Yeah.
And then the editors were like, well, you can't stop drawing the web that way, it looks stupid. But like fans eventually were like, oh, I love how they're drawing the webbing now. And so, as often happens in the comic book industry, the editors were like, I told you that webbing was good. Keep at it, Todd.
Good. Attaboys. Attaboys for everyone.
But beyond that, like, there was the Batman TV show and the Spider-Man TV show. Those were kind of my two big 90s comic book viewing options that I really loved. But what kept me, like, really in the comics was the art. Like, seeing it and then going home and kind of drawing my own comic books, that kind of stuff, trying to imitate some of the artwork. That's what like cemented the artwork for me. And as I got older, I kind of fell out of it around the time I was like 13. So towards the end of the 90s, you know, because I wasn't making my own money, but I was just a little too old to still be like, Mom, can we get a comic book? But when I turned 16 and I got my job for the first time, I was like, well, I'm going to go collect at least a comic book. I went to my local
I've been a good boy this week. You know, I did all my chores, ate my vegetables. I made a fucking comic book out of this.
Right.
But, yeah, so I started picking up Superman, which was new, because growing up, I was like, fucking
We're
Superman?
talking about 90s Superman here?
No, now, when I started this was like early 2000 Superman. Like, growing up, well, I hated, like, I still kind of hate 90s Superman.
Really?
Like, I love Dan Jurgens' art. Forever, it's like iconic Superman on my mind. And
Absolutely.
the Death of Superman story itself, he's awesome. But if you like read the Death of Superman trade, there's like these little stories that are getting tied up as that starts. And you're like, what was going on in the 90s, DC? Why are there like a bajillion mutants living in the sewers? And I know, like,
Well,
you're thinking,
and then there was the story afterwards, after Superman died, where it was like just some guy who was like, he would dress like Superman, and then you just kind of like try and rally Metropolis.
Yeah.
And I guess he was somebody? Like, he was like Superman's friend? I don't even know.
He was literally a guy that Superman saved once. Like, while he was doing construction. And as most construction workers are, he was also a military weapons expert designer scientist. Usually, like, when you get out of your advanced scientific courses, it's either manual labor or...
I think that's why MoDOT fines are so expensive. It's because you're taking away scientists when you mow these people over at night.
I actually did some hiring for MoDOT, and there's pretty stringent requirements. We needed a couple nuclear physicists and a couple for the guard railing. We really needed some special ops people who actually had operator knowledge.
I only have a master.
Theaters.
It's not a doctor. It's Guess I'll work at Quiznos.
We really, because
we need sandwich artists too.
These guardrails are pretty serious business.
Oh, you went to MIT?
So Superman dies. This dude puts on a cloak, and does he look like him at all?
No.
Are people fooled? Okay, so he doesn't look like him at all. People aren't fooled, but he's just his friend. He's like, Superman was my bro.
It wasn't
And-
even like a cloak. It was like he put on the shirt and then he put on like socks and
Oh,
like
I'm thinking
this
like
This is like
PJs.
a totally different dude altogether. Yeah, this literally like a fat middle-aged guy with a 3-day beard, and he's got like jogging, like 90s looking jogging shorts, so they're like super short shorts
super high.
over like blue spandex that comes up like halfway on his shins, and like some red Chuck Taylors, and he's like,
If it was Sylvester Stallone doing it, we wouldn't say anything because it's the 90s, but it was just some other guy. So
Yeah.
although to be fair, it's like a great moment in the series because it's like while he's suiting up, he's also like praying to God, like, oh, I hope nobody takes offense. Please tell Superman I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but while he's gone, the city's falling apart. I've got to go do something. It's what he would do if he were me.
maybe
So
the
it's what I'm
shame that
gonna
I'm going to
do.
generate from doing this will somehow bring Superman back.
That's kind of touching. I like that.
It is really well done. Like, I mean, if you see it in real life, you're like, this,
That dude's
this
insane.
poor crazy
Poor bastard,
guy.
right.
Let's get him in a home because he needs some
Gotham lost
supervision.
another one. This one's in Metropolis.
Go into his trailer and he's got like a stack of composition notebooks just filled with scrawlings. You're like, oh, all right.
To be fair, I mean, when this happens in Gotham, it's guys in hockey pants. So
So tell me some other artists that you like. I'm interested.
well, as I collected Superman,
Uh-huh.
I started, kind of looking into some of his lore because I knew like the basics, like Kryptonian and Jor-El, all that stuff. But I kind of went back, and right around this time, like Alex Ross was everywhere, and he is kind of, I mean, the gold standard for high tier art. So seeing his art, it was kind of like, well, I can still feel like a respectable artist and still want to do like this whole comic book gig.
Mm-hmm.
And it parlays into so many books, including Astro City, which is one of my favorites. But and here I am. I started buying all the comics I could get my hands on, and then I started buying only ones that I really enjoyed because I can't afford $60 a month in comic books.
That sounds like you need to get a second job, my friend.
Yeah.
So what's Astro City? I don't think I've read that one.
Not a lot of people have. It's basically a fictional city, like, any comic book city outside of like New York, basically.
Sure.
Are you
But
saying
it's-
Gotham isn't real? Or are you going on record to say Gotham isn't real?
I mean, any city besides New York and Gotham.
Okay.
But I mean, it's like a universe unto itself, but they have several archetype type heroes.
Uh-huh.
And most of what they focus on aren't necessarily the heroes, but like tales from, this guy's bellhop for a hotel. And, there'll be a whole issue about him talking about like the things he's seen as a bellhop in Astro City.
In a city full of superheroes. And
Yeah.
shit. Okay.
So it's kind of that Watchmen take without like necessarily being depressing as hell.
Nice. That's fun. Who is it? Marvel
It's actually
or indie?
it's Wildstorm, so I guess that's technically owned by DC, but it's kind of DC's indie time.
More indie than Vertigo.
Yeah. It's the one that like people maybe still don't realize 100% is owned by, DC.
Right.
But yeah,
Can I ask? It seems like a lot of independent comic book companies usually is a rogue artist or creator or both, and everything that just kind of makes his own vanity label. Is that kind of the same thing here? Like with Jim Lee and Vertigo, and then J. Michael Straczynski and Joe Comics for Top Cow.
It is exactly what happened here. In fact, I think Wildstorm was Jim Lee's, and when
I think you're right. Yeah.
I think when DC was finally like, "Come over, draw Batman, we love you." He's also like,
Jim Lee.
"Here's my own franchise as well." But I mean, it's a really good title. So,
Cool. Sounds fun.
but that's Me, I guess.
Sounds similar to a title that I read and I was really into. Not a lot of people might know about. Is a series called Transmetropolitan, and it's oh god, I might get this wrong. It's written by someone very well known in the comic book world, but
Oh yeah, I love that guy.
the name eludes me at the moment because I'm really tired. But
Is this the part where we all like stop talking and then we just edit in you going,
it's
Googling
this
this
guy.
guy?
Feel free to pull it up. But Transmetropolitan is it's kind of it's not a superhero thing at all. It's more based upon a journalist, a gonzo journalist, and he is looking into a corrupt presidential election. It's very interesting, and it's a fun take on a character who's modeled kind of after the Hunter S. Thompson insane journalistic approach.
Oh, that sounds sweet.
Oh, it's really good. The dude's name is Spider Jerusalem. You have to get past a few of the eccentricities of the comic book itself. There's some strangeness going on within the art style, but the strangeness is on purpose. Like, if you look at a picture of Spider Jerusalem, you'll think he looks just ridiculous because his look is he's a bald dude and his glasses is one green circular frame and the other one is a long rectangular red frame.
I love it.
Well, yeah, that dude right there. That's Spider Jerusalem.
You know, I think I said that prematurely. This is going to take some adjustment.
Yeah, and so like I said, there's some eccentricities to the comic that take a little bit of getting used to, but it's one of those comics that the entire world is so well crafted. Like, it's set in the future. It's set in like this cyberpunk dystopian kind of hellhole.
A little bit of Dark Knight Strikes Again in there.
No.
That's a whole different kind of hellhole.
Yeah, that's a whole different kind of hellhole with people that like to slice and dice. No, this one's kind of set in. Everyone's got like visors and shit, and like birds are flying around with 3 wings and a TV screen embedded on the side of them. It's a really strange, just cyber future where technology's gone bonkers.
Right.
And it's basically and the story that plays out also plays into these crazy technologies and how Spider Jerusalem, as a journalist, uses them to take on this corrupt establishment. It's a really interesting story, really well written. It's mature and it's for mature audiences, but it's really well crafted. So I'd recommend it to anyone. So that's my crazy comic book series that people might not know about. My second recommendation would be Sandman. What would you say? What do you think?
Well, I haven't read a lot of Sandman.
Well, I'm just saying, if you...
Did a little bit of the Lucifer stuff that was kind of based out of some of his stuff, but that was about it. And that was mostly because of the TV show.
Yeah, the Lucifer story arc in Sandman was really fucking cool. No, I'm just curious, like a comic book that you've read in your past that you think maybe not a whole lot of people are known, just maybe kind of like a niche, you could say, and has a niche following, but it's a really badass comic. Like,
right, yeah.
think?
No, I get it. Well, see, originally I was going to say Y the Last Man, which, you know, I gave you a hard time about doing mainstream. That's a Vertigo title, but now I think, like, everybody basically knows about that. And I found out about it from Eugene, you know, whenever we worked at Blockbuster together. He kind of told me about it, and I checked it out years later, and wish I would have done it that day. It was a fantastic story. Sure. Brian K. Vaughan, you know, amazing writer. But actually, more recent than that, I read a story by J. Michael Straczynski called Rising Stars. I kind of touched on it earlier. It was his own. It was technically created by Top Cow, and then like per issue, they kind of bounced around to like Image and a couple of other second party creditors, or I guess you'd call them. But mostly it was Straczynski's own title, and it was Joe Comics, I believe. And if you've never read anything Straczynski, then you're missing just the best storytelling, I think, next to Jeff Loeb and a few other people. Like, he did an amazing run on Thor around after, what would you say, after Civil War and everything, when he took over Thor and they were in Nebraska.
Yeah,
Loki was a chick. Spoiler alert, Loki was a chick. Damn it.
I mean, eventually, so was Thor.
Yeah, that's true.
That's kind of a Marvel, like, standard play, like, oh, sales are flagging. Turn one of them into a female.
Yeah, hell, when was the last time he was black?
That at least adds some spice besides, like, I don't know, it's just the same story.
Right, yeah, that's more for the companies that make the movies to decide obscure ethnicities and sexual orientations. But anywho, Straczynski, amazing artist, did a great Spider-Man run and everything that kind of extended some older stories from whichever one where Gwen Stacy died. I can't think of what it was.
I mean, like, which time?
Yeah, exactly. And then also did a great Thor run and everything, which was fantastic. Definitely check it out. Anyway, this is his own baby. It was really well done, top level artwork. I don't even know who the artist was, but it was just, I'd put it in like the Jim Lee or Michael Turner kind of feeling, where it's like very well defined people and the shading was real nice.
90s looking stuff.
Yeah, not a lot of mullets or anything like that, or underwear outside the pants, but other than that, real good stuff.
I guess like saying 90s looking stuff kind of...
well, that's what comes to mind for me, is yellow spandex.
Because you almost get like, oh, so they've got like 3 unnecessary belts wrapped around their like calves and thighs, and
right.
For some reason he's got like 1 glove, and
exactly,
it's like fingerless. And...
his power is he can control reality, but he also wears armor.
Yeah, like... it's usually the case.
Yeah, no, this was all very, very modern. And have you ever read it? Did I pass it over to you? Oh, it was fantastic. The story basically centers around a group of 113 children in Nebraska. I don't know why Straczynski keeps going out to Nebraska. But there is a meteor that touches down, kind of a phenomenon. And every child that is close to conception at that point is given a certain measure of power. And the government finds out about this very quickly whenever, within the next couple of years, there's 100 kids being born with superpowers. They come in, they kind of set up is concentration camp the right word? Is kind of a concentration camp. And, but just kind of monitor the kids as they're growing up and, kind of see what they can do with these kids at a very young age. The main story follows around a protagonist named John, who also goes by Poet. And he is kind of an investigator. He's one of the stronger of all of them. And he finds that there's a recent rash of these superpowered adults at this point being killed, and that as a byproduct, everybody who's living's powers are being amplified, kind of like that Jet Li movie.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so come to find out, one of the girls who was born actually at the tail end of this event and had very low powers was also schizophrenic, and the schizophrenic side was the one who had I should have done spoiler alert. The schizophrenic side was the one who knew about this. That was her power, is she knew that if you killed one of them, everybody else would get stronger. And so she starts manipulating some of the bigger guns to go after each other, and to the point where the US steps in, makes things worse, amplifies everybody's powers through the roof, and then there's like this whole hero versus hero standoff. The ending gets a little sci-fi and weird for my taste, but the progression of the story through it is just top bars.
What time frame did this come out?
That is a good question. I want to say that it came out in like 2006, like around that time. I'm pretty sure I was out of high school whenever it happened, and I was from 01 to 04. So
that's always an interesting question for me.
Yeah, because I picked up the Hellspawn. I was picking up the Hellspawn at the same time, where it was not Endgame, but the one before that, where like Spawn was basically taking on God and Satan and all that. And if there's any Spawn readers out there, that one's fantastic. And that was around the same time. So, back whenever Spawn was current and people cared.
Yeah, it was so fantastic. You literally just gave it to me.
What's that?
That Spawn run.
Did I?
Yeah.
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
That was probably a lot of alcohol ago.
I was gonna say you probably drunk. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Sounds like me.
Well, I know we touched on this comic club earlier. I'd like to mention it again just because I thought it was really cool. Frank Miller, the Batman, is it Returns, I think?
Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, Batman Returns. Well, that's like a whole other. Oh.
Okay, so is the Frank Miller one the one where it starts off with him kind of as an old dude in a race car?
Yeah.
Okay,
it has
that one's badass.
That famous line about today is a good day to die.
Yeah.
That's a badass comic. I really enjoyed that one, and it was a really cool Frank Miller take on Gotham.
Yeah, and I think that
he's good at making like bad guys that you're like they're kind of like cute for being bad guys, you know, not cute as in like like he's talking about slice and dice, and he's just kind of retarded. He's not really like he's evil. Yeah, he's like the scene I'm talking about is Batman sitting there talking to, or no, not Batman. He's Bruce Wayne at this moment, and these two guys who are in this gang that's kind of growing in this city.
Yeah, I can visualize.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
And they got these big glasses on, and they kind of look punkish, you know. And
you almost can't understand what they're saying.
Yeah, and they're talking kind of similar to the way they talked in A Clockwork Orange, kind of their own language, and they're talking and jiving back and forth with each other. And they're talking about slice and dicing, like, oh, it's slice and dice, and the other one's like, oh no, man, this guy looks into it, and like, I don't want to give away the entire story, so I won't. But the way Batman handles that situation is actually really cool. So I would recommend that as another, just toss it out there, because we were talking about it earlier. And that's the Frank Miller Batman. So
I think that Frank Miller Batman's also been credited to be like, you know, the coming of age where people are like, oh my god, comic books aren't for kids.
Right, yeah.
You know,
they can be totally serious, yeah. And that's an interesting topic that we could dive into too. Like, I'm trying to think the first real time where I was like, okay, this is like a serious comic. I don't necessarily think, you know, nudity or any of that is that way either, because there's a lot of like real smutty kind of I don't know if you've seen them, like Lady Pendragon and shit like that, where it's like a comic but she's in bikini chainmail that her tits are all hanging out.
Looking at you 90s comics.
Right. Well, see, I'm a weirdo, so I go and see, like, I could buy 5 of these for $1, and I'm like, this is weird enough for fuck yeah. I like, all right, let's do it. I'll admit it, whatever. I got a few of them. And I didn't spend a whole lot of money on them. Hold your, you know. But, so, I'm talking like serious storyline.
I got one.
What's up?
Touching earlier about Green Lantern and how like there was a story that was the culmination of years worth of storytelling. In DC, there was one called Identity Crisis, which was a pretty simple story. If you haven't read it, basically,
I haven't, but I've heard I really need to.
Yeah, well, basically, what happens is a low-level superhero named Elongating Man, because DC just comes up with the best names.
Richards. No. Stretch Armstrong. No, wait.
Well,
that's a toy.
and the great thing is they made another character who has the exact same powers named Plastic Man, and so like, you know, you basically had about as different as Night and Later That Night when it came to actual ability. But anywho, his wife dies, and it's this terrible. Like,
I feel like we should have like a retroactive spoiler alert for anything going forward, because this is like.
Oh yeah. This is a huge spoiler alert. So if you're listening and
this came out when?
Like a while ago, but like if you're reading it and you know the end, it like
Well, I'm not gonna say the end.
Well, that's,
Yeah,
yeah.
just kind of okay. So like
Get to 60%.
yeah, I'm just giving the tip. All right.
Just the tip.
Yeah, that's all it is. But anywho, this guy's wife dies, and that doesn't sound like a big deal and everything, but in the manner that she dies, it is really messed up. Like
It is.
it'll make you cry. I
It's
don't
like
care
the
who
most
you are.
heartbreaking first issue to a story.
Yeah, and
Because
then it launches this kind of universe expanding witch hunt for who was able to break into this superhero's house and kill his wife so savagely. And then with it, you start unraveling, like, there's this bigger kind of story that's not a conspiracy per se, but more like good people doing bad things for a good reason. And it launches... Oh man, the OMAC project, it launches like so many other things that happen far, far down the line when it comes to DC.
Continuity.
Yeah. And
You say it launches the OMAC project. Just another disclaimer: not everything that came from this book was awful and shitty. So
again, just 60%.
no, sorry, I just had to take a shot at the OMAC project.
But that was the first time, and I read this as an early 20-year-old and everything, and that was the first time, because not just what had happened to her, but what had happened to other people while they're trying to like figure out this story. Like, it really pulls at the heartstrings, and it was the first time I was ever like, wow, I can't believe this ever got published and was put in mass production.
The first time... Thanks. That's interesting. I really do need to read Identity Crisis.
You won't regret it, dude.
Everyone's told me, and I think I have it somewhere.
Underneath the coffee mug somewhere.
The first time, and I'm going back into actually my childhood here. The first time I recall watching a comic, I should say, and this isn't comic book, this is still comic related, but the first time I recall watching, it was a cartoon more, but I lump it in there because I felt like I was a kid watching something that was a little bit, just maybe a notch or two above my, I guess, mental, whatever. It was a show called Gargoyles, and it was a cartoon.
Oh, that was fantastic.
That was a fantastic cartoon. But it was talking about some kind of deeper shit that you didn't really see on, the other cartoons, like whatever, Biker Mice from Mars.
Oh.
But
anybody else playing that intro in their head right now?
I just remember driving up buildings and shit, and they had those antennas. But God, that was full yay for
the stuff we swallowed in the 90s, like, and it was
right.
This is what we
Biker
got.
Mice from Mars was totally a ripoff of something else that was just totally ridiculous. It was the same. I just can't even remember it. But Gargoyles, I think, was a legit show. I think people put out, like, there was some thought behind the storylines that they did with that show.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's what comes to mind when I think of at least comic or cartoon that I really thought was more mature, or at least was a maturation of what I was used to. Even though this was still, I'm talking, this is way back when I was still a kid, but it was still a maturation point. Another time that I felt like I've read something, and I mean, this kind of seems like an obvious answer. Watchmen was pretty serious when it came to, I felt like, okay, this is some serious art form. And it's I think the storyline there is kind of a mature, or maturing into, like, because it encompasses all themes, there's some serious things that happen in there with some seriously twisted people. So I don't know. There's one more I want to mention, and I'll pass it along. There's a book, I think it was called, I want to say The Eternals. It might have been. It was
I think I know
about
what you're talking about.
the Celestials.
Yeah, it's sorry if I can.
Go ahead, because I mean, it's about a story about how Earth is basically an egg,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead, because you might know a little bit.
Yeah, that's Marvel, right?
Yeah, it was Marvel.
Yeah, no, that was. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
It was the Eternals, and the group is called the Celestials, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the Eternals were the big, almost Galactus-looking.
No, those
type
were the
creatures.
They were
Celestials.
Galactus.
Yeah,
He
Galactus was part of it.
One of them's one, and there's like a group of humans that are basically the others. It's almost like a heroes kind of thing where they find out they have powers. They've always existed.
And like Galactus, I want to say he was like the good guy in the sense where he was like the reason he ate planets was to.
It was M. Night Shyamalan was Galactus was actually purifying the universe somehow of some. I forgot what. Like these things were eventually. Galactus was going around eating these eggs, and these eggs eventually hatched into something like I don't know, like
and
new
like
gods or something. It
and
was something
people being
ridiculous.
born with powers was kind of a byproduct of
Right.
that.
And the crazy thing about I really should reread this one too after any crisis or whatever. But then a weird thing was it was kind of like I got a sense that I was reading a sort of Marvel Bible or almost like an establishment of a religion within that universe. Like, okay, so we're talking about gods and like how their actual reality is formed and why it's formed in the way and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking about like it was like a building of a religion within a comic book series. So that was another one. That was the last one I was going to mention that I felt was kind of an interesting comic that read more than just some superheroes kicking some ass or whatever.
Well, on that one though, that's a really great example because it goes back to an old Jack Kirby storyline before he switched to DC, which is why, like, if you look at the artwork in that, John Romita Jr. did the artwork, but if you see, like, the influences are all, like, the same kind of Jack Kirby things that you find, like, through a lot of old Fantastic Four and a lot of, like, the DC New God stuff.
It was really well drawn, too, yeah.
But it was one of those where it's like they did a really good job of taking this old story and kind of breathing new life into it. And it really...
Gave it the Watchmen treatment?
Yeah, no, they made it better.
I agree with that sentiment. So I actually didn't like what the movie did.
Yeah.
Too bad Nick's not here. He'd be bitching. He'd be like, oh, the movie was right. Anyways, go ahead.
My kind of alternate choice would be a book called Atomica, which is, from an artist standpoint, it's a lot of like surreal, like visual representations of things, and it's almost a little too heady, metaphorical kind of stuff. But it's basically a metaphor for what the atomic age did to the Soviet Union, and it visually shows a creature named Atomica, who is basically a transformed Russian child into a god, and he, like, the first trade basically has him going through and killing all these old Russian gods, which kind of represents the state, like the Soviet Union, wiping away their heritage and implanting itself as, this is what you are if you're Russian. You're not Siberian, you're not Ukrainian, you're not someone who has this religion or this viewpoint or this way of thinking. You now only think what serves the state and how can you further, our atomic presence and our, scientific presence in the world.
I gotta say, that sounds strangely close to what Neil Gaiman wrote recently with American Gods. Just kind of establishing, like, at this day and age and everything, this is what would be a deity and everything, as opposed to these old, like, concepts.
The concept, of deities actually having power due to how much people worship them, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a concept behind American Gods. So explain this to me again in Atomica, you said. Who's that by? Avenatti? How do you say that name?
I've never been able to say it right, I don't think, but it's Abenanti, and the artwork is by a guy named Andrew Dabb. Andrew Dabb wrote the story, Abenatti did part of the story and the artwork. But it's basically, there's a poor Russian child who kind of wanders away from his mother, and he gets seduced by the state, which is this kind of all-powerful Russian god, or he's represents himself as all-powerful, but he's, clearly supported by his further creations. Without them, he's nothing. Sure. But he takes his child and he transforms him into Atomica, which kind of represents taking young Russia as a culture and forcing it into kind of a future culture of having atomic power and having might and competing with the Western world. And then he uses
holy
that
metaphorical influence, Batman.
Yeah, I know, right? But he uses the god called the state, then forces Atomica to go through and squash all of these other old Russian gods, which are, there's one that represents like the Siberian wilderness, and there's one that represents actual truth, and there's one that represents like basically holding up the earth, sort of a Russian version of yeah. But it's really interesting, and I mean, I'm not Russian. I have no like special ties, but it's done in such a
Russian?
A closet Russian affiliate here.
Are you subverting things?
USSR
sir?
for life.
Right.
I don't know Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin's not a friend of mine.
I hear great things. We could work together. It'd be wonderful and great. Anyways, cool. That actually sounds really neat. All right. Well, thank you for the description of that. Unfortunately, we had an audio buffer overflow, so we lost quite a bit of material. So we had to kind of do a cut right there, and
like an hour of gold.
It was
you will
gold.
Never know.
Actually, yeah,
My favorite part was when John admitted to having at least 5 gay lovers in the past 2 years. So.
In the past 2 years.
On the ride here.
On the ride here. It was a mighty fine ride for me.
I was the only one on the ride here.
The description. Wow, were you? How many of them were you?
me and Chris carpooled, so.
Wow.
Sorry, I'm loud and proud. I don't know about you.
Well, unfortunately, we lost a lot of material, but we still have a lot of material. So instead of taking up too much more time, we're probably just going to wrap it up here. This, again, as I was explaining on the kind of like the prologue that I did, this is a podcast primarily for me. It's for the people within the Facebook group that I started, Comic Collective, and it's just to get a bunch of people together who don't know each other or who do know each other, or a mesh or a mix, and have them talk shop about comics of all sorts. And so again, I would like to thank my the guests that showed up today, John and Chris.
No problem.
And I'm hopefully we'll have you guys back on.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And then we'll have more people on, and we'll just kind of... I envision kind of doing a roster or like a rotating thing where, okay, who wants to do next week? And, I get 3 or 4 people signed up for it. And then... because I'm pretty sure I don't want to do this every single time I do a Comic Collective podcast, but I'm more than willing to hit record and let 4 people talk in my garage for an hour and a half. So I just kind of reiterate my point. I say we, but I'm gonna work on trying to get like a WordPress, trying to get maybe a SoundCloud or something like that. I mean, I do have a SoundCloud. I made it real quick, but podcasts that are hour plus long, you upload more than one and you're already over your limit. So it wouldn't be able to house the material that we have for long, because it would cost money at that point. And I'm already paying for a SoundCloud for my other podcast. So,
John actually doesn't have a problem paying the fees, so...
It's true, and in that vein, I'm taking donations to pay the fees.
Well, I was thinking if we set up some sort of Patreon, and then if people within the Comic Collective... Do you guys know what Patreon is?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I watch a couple of YouTube channels, and they use Patreons.
Yeah, Patreon is basically, you can say, okay, every single time this YouTuber releases a video, I'll give him 50 cents. Or you can say, I want to give this YouTuber $1 every month. You can just set up some sort of weird payment plan.
It's like we're PBS now.
Right. Well,
So
I was just thinking,
listeners like
if we did it on a local scale, and then we said, okay, well, if we have, say, 8 people or 10 people or even 12 people that say, okay, well, I want to be a part of the podcast. I want to talk about comics on the podcast, and we get 15 people, and if they all just say, okay, $1 a month. I mean, that's less than a fifth of a cup of coffee, right? So, and then that would buy a SoundCloud Pro. Right
If
there.
that doesn't work out, though, we could all just have a sexy car wash.
We could.
Like the 3 or 4 or 5 of us. Just...
I'll have a big old CC for Comic Collective on my nipples. And, that'll be glorious. So, I would like to make a pitch real quick. If there is anybody who is listening who wants to be on the rotating roster, I would kind of like to delegate a little bit out for if you want to maybe do the WordPress site. I'll give you credentials to log in and kind of manage that or whatever. Or we were talking about right before we started this. Right after the edit that we lost, we were kind of discussing about how we could maybe put links up to all the source material that we're talking about, all the comics that we were talking about. That's going to be a kind of a lengthy process. So if there's anybody that is web sleuthy enough, not necessarily sleuthy, but just savvy enough to be able to get a bunch of links and get a WordPress popped up real quick, and you're willing to donate a little bit of time to help this what I hope to be organic podcast grow, let me know, and we'll set you up as an admin for the WordPress or whatever. So just throwing that idea out there. Like I said, just trying to grow it, kind of I don't know if grassroots is the right word, but on just a real organic local. I know the people, and we're not really trying to change the world. We're just wanting to shoot the shit. So here you go. Here's our podcast. That's where I'm going in a nutshell. So I think we're probably at 1 hour and 10. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and wrap it up. John and Chris, thank you, gentlemen, for being on the first. And I hope to have you on many further podcasts. Do you guys have anything else to say? You want to add anything?
No, I had a blast. I'd absolutely love to come back. This is
this is fun.
This was a lot of fun. And, I know Nick couldn't make it and everything because of the work schedule and everything like that. But if you get a chance, definitely take it because...
that's fun.
Yeah.
Maybe next time. Is there any of your artwork that's out there you want to promote real quick?
Not right now. I made a Facebook post a few days ago that was super vague. There's a project that I'm working on with John.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if you're halfway smart at all, you should be able to guess pretty much what it is.
I honestly didn't guess it.
At the moment, it's almost disappointing. But I mean, at the moment, I don't have anything really worth posting up.
Okay.
But I appreciate the offer.
Well, this is a platform, so I'll most definitely. I love local stuff. I love homebrew. Everything is my game. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up.